episode of the Match Slip podcast. My name is Frank Angeloni. I am your host of the Match Slip. If you'd be interested in checking out our most recent episode with Gamers Guild Arizona, it is out now, and you could check that out at anchor.fm/thematchslip or wherever you listen to podcasts. But on this episode, we're talking with Jen and Don from Treasure Coast Magic, located in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Jen, Don, how are you?
Good.
Terrific.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it. So you guys are based out in Florida, Port St. Lucie. I haven't had a chance to tell any previous guests this, but I actually got to go to your store prior to us doing this recording, which I'm glad that worked out. And I happened to be there the day that you guys were there. Because Don, I think you were telling me that I believe you're only there on Wednesdays. Is that correct?
No, we're actually there most days of the week, but we tend to get in later in the afternoon. Wednesday is the only day that we're there the entire day, as our staff has that day off.
I see. And how many people do you have on staff currently?
We have 2 employees.
2 employees. And now, are they full-time or is it just part-time?
Full-time.
Oh, wow. That's good. And from a day-to-day operation standpoint, how do you two split up the roles?
Wow. Well, we have a lot of games, so we kind of tackle our own little games. Magic is definitely something because it encompasses the whole store majorly. The previous owner did just Magic and sports cards, and when we took it over, we expanded on that. But Magic, because it's just massive in our store, we do a lot of deck lists, and it spans way back. I think back to like 4th edition, right? In the store. So it takes both of us to be on top of that. But all the other games, we kind of have like our own,
Yeah, and I think too, some of what you might have been pertaining to, I kind of tend to handle ordering and product for the top 3. We do Magic, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! And then Jen takes care of the satellite games, which actually now outnumber the big 3. She does all 4 games from Bandai. She does the new Lorcana that we're bringing on board, as well as the recently departed Vanguard.
And outside of like the big 3 that you mentioned, how are the outlier games, since they're kind of new games entering into the territory of TCGs? How has the turnout been for those types of games when compared to like the big 3?
So and I think a lot of this happened during COVID. We've seen a dramatic decline in attendance with a lot of the standard players in Magic. And I think some of that could be from just the sets coming out too quickly. That seems to be a big issue. But our other games outside of the big 3, we have a huge attendance for them. And sometimes that varies, but Bandai is really coming up. They're moving up, I think, especially with One Piece.
Yeah, especially One Piece. It's gotten as big as Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is actually our largest single event attendance, a regular weekly event that's attended, and One Piece is actually catching it.
Oh, no kidding. So Magic isn't the number 1. That's the first one that would have crossed my mind as the most popular, but that's not the case.
No, actually, Magic, unfortunately, and as Jen just mentioned, since COVID, plus I think Hasbro's had some influence, has definitely been in the decline over the last couple of years. We went from having a minimum, we used to have 3 pods for Friday Night Magic Draft. Now, sometimes we've recovered to the point where we have 1 every week, but there was a time when we struggled to have 1 pod. Other games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, One Piece, even Pokemon, we have really never failed to fire. We have failed to fire on Magic every once in a while.
And I know Jen alluded to it with the frequency of the product. How does that affect you guys from a store standpoint in terms of the frequency of the products coming out so fast? Because I know the players can get fatigued from that. Does that also hamper things from a business side for you guys?
Definitely. And I think that if we didn't have such a large base with Commander players, they've seemed to kind of stepped into this weird role of taking on being the standard players, so to speak. And you can see that in some of the products too. You'll see that, we have more commander decks coming out that are really geared towards those standard sets. And that's most of where we do a lot of our business, is that the commander players are really showing up and, holding down the store for us.
Yeah, and it's really a lot of the customers are on the Magic side are absolutely suffering from wallet fatigue. It's interesting that we have the two groups. We have the groups of the new Bandai games where they can't get enough product. We can't get enough to supply them. And with Magic, we have loads that we can pre-order, but the customers are just set after set after set. They're really experiencing wallet fatigue.
And why do you think it's Commander that became the go-to benefactor of Magic itself? And I would imagine from COVID and everybody being at home, playing on Spell Table, I know, became a popular thing. Do you think that kind of jump-started Commander being almost like the mainstay now with Magic?
I don't know. I think a lot of it is because it's casual. And I think a lot of people, especially, I guess you could also say in regions, it varies. But I really think that in our area, that tabletop Magic, people playing at home, and that's kind of like, spilled over into Commander. You don't see like a lot of people, I guess, being overly competitive, so to speak. I mean, they can be. We've hosted tournaments where we do have two-headed giant Commander and other Commander format, other Commander games that we've done that's more competitive. But for the most part, is very casual.
Yeah,
and I think people like that.
One of the things that we've done as a store, when we took over the store, it was definitely a grinders store. It was primarily Magic only. The previous owner had gotten rid of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon and was strictly attracting the standard and modern grinders, the people who wanted to try to qualify for the Pro Tour. It was just an extremely competitive environment. We wanted to change that. We wanted to get back to more of a casual audience, people that were playing more to have fun. Sure, the object of the game is winning, but our players have fun. That's going to cater more toward the casual players and the Commander players. And I say to this day, of all the groups of people that play at our store, and especially Magic, our Commander players have the most fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, even at my own store, I've definitely seen a drop off of the competitive play and much more of the casual side of play. I mean, we still have, modern nights. We still have, the RCQs that'll be held every once in a while, the store championships. But even the store championships, which you would think would be more of a competitive event, even those I've noticed are held in a very casual manner. Do you see the same type of thing with events of the competitive nature that were once more, for lack of a better word, more cutthroat?
Absolutely.
Yes, and I handle a lot of those games and setting them up and scheduling them. And sometimes we don't fire them. We end up holding those promos and stuff like that back, and we end up letting them expire and going, because you have to wait till the next standard set comes out before you can actually use them. And we end up using those more towards our Commander players, because we just don't have another group big enough to host those events, unfortunately, anymore. And I saw a lot of that decline after COVID, and then also with some of them pulling back a lot of the competitive, ways of getting into the larger events.
Yeah.
But the RCQs are cool. We've done a couple of them. We've got another one coming up. I'm a little nervous because I don't know what the turnout's going to be like. They can get expensive because you have to buy the kits. You have to have a judge on staff, which costs money. So it's really hard for the stores to keep up and keep pace with that.
But interestingly enough, and it kind of goes along with this question, one of the few pieces of negative feedback that we've received from a disgruntled customer accused us of killing competitive Magic. We don't actually take full credit. But in our store anyway, we're not going to hide the fact that we have tried to cater more to the casual, more to the home player. And we had a lot of help from Hasbro at the helms of Wizards of the Coast, killing competitive Magic, as Jen just mentioned. Now there's 3 companies now that have their hands in the pot and all want money for you to host like an RCQ. So it's not just us, but we don't really mind. We like the friendlier casual formats.
Definitely, yes.
Oh, sure. That's definitely understandable. And that's kind of personally what I prefer as well. And even though I enjoy the RCQs, I'm thinking back to the first ever competitive event I played in. It was a lot different. It was a lot less talking between the players. And it was a little awkward for me because I'm, pretty social. Mm-hmm. And now this past RCQ I attended for Pioneer, it was the complete opposite. I didn't feel there was any competitive vibe there at all. Like people were in a competitive tournament, but it felt like it was just like, a Friday Night Magic type thing. And I kind of liked it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of events that we love.
Yeah.
And it was, they, like Jen, you were saying, they are a lot more expensive to attend. And I know it's more of a cost on the store side too. And even just seeing like, I don't know if it's like this from a business store standpoint, but are you required to have a certain number of people attend in order to run the event? I know we had, I think, maybe 30 to 40 people who attended the RCQ I went to.
Absolutely. You have to have at least 8 to fire the event.
So it's more strict. It's not like, you're doing a casual event at the store. If it's something like that sanctioned like that, it has to follow Wizards guideline.
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely. I think the very first RCQ was a little bit kind of testing the waters. There wasn't really a lot of guidelines on if you had to have a judge type thing. But I think now it's now a requirement. So they've kind of changed it as they've gone along, too. And the levels of kits that you can get. And, it's a little confusing. And I thought it was a little bit easier whenever we had back in the day, like PPQs and PPTQs and things like that. It was, we knew what to expect, basically. So with these, they can vary, I think.
And, to further reference back to what you were saying about, Wizards kind of shutting down competitive play at that point in time where nobody really knew if they were going to even bring it back. And then when they did, it was kind of a shock. It almost seems like at that point, people kind of checked out of it. I mean, I always liked it being there. It was always one of my favorite things. So I'm glad it's back now, but it's, I think that period of time where we went into an unknown phase from both a player and a store standpoint, I'm sure there were times where you guys were trying to figure out, okay, before you transitioned the store to be more casual, I'm sure it was like what do we do now with events and stuff?
Oh, definitely. Yes.
And that's one of the things that drove our diversification. Mm-hmm. When we took over the store, we were convinced we wanted to bring Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon back. But beyond that, it was somewhat the decrease in the confusion in the direction of Magic that we said, hey, we can't have all our eggs in one basket now. We've got to start looking at some of these other games, and we're so thankful that we did because other than, as Jen mentioned, other than the Commander players, that's kind of what got us through COVID was, I'd say 50% the Commander players and 50% the fact that we diversified into so many other games. We were able to keep the business going.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. And sadly, we've watched so many stores in our area shut down. And it was from a lack of diversifying. They didn't, expand into other games.
One game was strictly Magic, and that was it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's limiting.
It is. And I think there's like a 70% fail rate possibility within the first 4 years of opening a store for Magic. So
yeah, trading card game stores are rough already. But don't get me wrong, this store that did Magic only, I mean, they were the epitome. We kind of modeled some of the things we do after them.
Absolutely.
But limiting themselves to just Magic is it was a struggle. And, that's why we're glad we diversified. I know our name still says Treasure Coast Magic. But yeah, diversification was huge.
And it's funny too, because I've talked to some other stores about this. It's kind of fascinates me because growing up, Pokemon was something, you would collect the cards. Nobody in my generation really played it. And it wasn't until COVID I saw the big boom of people buying Pokemon again. And I was kind of like took me back. And I was like, now to hear people play it and your store, it's very popular to play there. What do you think was the change of that? Or in Florida, has Pokemon always been popular from what you guys have witnessed?
Actually, from what we've seen, Pokemon has been extremely popular since before COVID. What we saw happened during COVID is, as you mentioned, a lot of people did it as a kid, had gotten away from it, and I guess idle hands, they started digging through the attic and looking for things to do quarantined at home, and either found their old Pokemon collection, or two, couldn't find it, called their mom, and their mom sold it, gave it away, sold it in a yard sale. That's kind of what resparked the collecting. But as far as the player base, there's been a pretty challenging player base in Florida for quite some time.
And is it a challenge at all? Like, I'm not sure off the top of my head how many other stores are in the area, like within the vicinity of you guys. But is there any competition in terms of like trying to hold, say, these Pokemon events? Like, because I know out here, and I'm not sure if it's done by you, but I know in some other areas it is. The stores will coordinate with each other on when to host various events. So, a Magic event for, say, Modern is not running at the same time at another store. I don't know if that's something that goes on by you, if you guys are the only store in the Port St. Lucie area.
No, we're very lucky for Pokemon. We actually have the regional coordinator who we know personally. We knew him before he got promoted to that position. He coordinates and creates a spreadsheet of the real competitive, the League Challenge and the League Cups. He creates a spreadsheet so that we can go in and stores can coordinate and try not to step on each other. And we're the only one in Port St. Lucie, but this is all over Florida. So let's say on the Pokemon Cup, we'll schedule ours for maybe the same weekend as Pensacola. They're far enough away. We're not going to pull from each other. But yes, there is a huge amount of coordination, more with Pokemon than with Magic.
Yeah, with Magic, especially for our commander group, that seems to be we see a lot of our people traveling because they play other formats, like Modern as well. And they tend to hook us up with the stores that they're going to. So we get in communication with them, and we do try to schedule our events where we're not bumping into one another from outside of the county.
And do all of the events that you host in this regard, because this I'm not sure of, my store tends to do it a lot, just because they have a lot of promos and stuff for events on hand. And I know, Jen, you were saying you have to wait till a certain period before promos can be used.
Yeah, certain ones. Yeah.
Okay. And are certain ones only allowed for certain events, or can you give them out when you want, depending upon the type of event? How is that decided?
So Magic has on WPN's website, it gives you a little background of, what promos are coming out for the period. They did send us out the Love Your LGS promos. So we still have some of those left over. When we try to give those out, to people, just at every event that we host. Promos that we get for the select periods for Friday Night Magic, or it used to be Friday Night Magic promos, those can be pretty much given out during any time. But the store championship, game day, those all have to be during whatever the dates are that they have for them. If you don't use them during that time, you have to wait until the next standard set comes out before you can use them for promotional material again. So we try to keep those separate and wait until those, till that time goes by. But we also work with the rep as well. Nelson's a really good guy. So he gives us, on our toes and everything about what's, coming down the pipe. And also when we can use those promos.
And how well do you think they factor in terms of getting people to come down to the store and play?
I think some of them are awesome. Some of them really help out. I know during our pre-releases that there's usually, I think there's like 2 promos that are the same with every set. They're going to be a lot more valuable. And we hold those back sometimes and not use them during pre-release because it's just so difficult to really find a winner for that particular promo because it's very hard to make it fair, especially whenever pre-release is supposed to be a more casual type setting. So we don't want it to be something where people are trying to win this promo. So we end up holding those particular ones back because we still want our store to remain a casual event during that time period. And everybody ends up getting the same price support no matter where they finish at, unless you are undefeated. But those we tend to use for our bigger events.
But yeah, and to further answer the question too, we have had some promotional material, promos and or like the dice for Lord of the Rings. People wanted to play in the event for no other reason but to qualify for the
Yes.
for the premium.
And with the store being more casual, like you mentioned, how are the pre-release events like turnout wise, especially like with the last Lord of the Rings set was a big hyped one, and one was probably one of my favorite ones. Was it like that out in Florida too? Because it seemed to be like a universal thing that everybody was pretty stoked about this event.
Yeah, I think that we had a pretty good turnout.
Yeah, our turnouts for pre-releases have been slowly increasing since COVID. I think Lord of the Rings was our best since. And part of the reason too, though, as Jen mentioned, we have shifted from a competitive pre-release environment that the previous owner used to run, where the top finishers would get, the bulk of the packs that are provided by Wizards. We've shifted to the Pokemon model, where basically if you come and play and you stay for all 3 rounds, you're going to qualify for that prize support, however much it is, from Wizards of the Coast. So it's evenly distributed. Now, we still give something for the competitive players. If you manage to win all 3 rounds, then you get an extra pack.
Yeah.
But everybody's basically going to get 3 packs. I believe it's 3 packs.
It's 3 packs, yeah.
Just if you stay and play all 3 rounds. We reward people for playing. It's a new set. Everybody's learning the cards. There may be new mechanics that everyone's learning. We just want people to come out and have fun for 3 rounds, and it's been very successful with the evenly distribution of the prize support.
Yeah.
I think that's a great incentive. Definitely encourages people to stay around. And
Yes.
with the previous owner, I know you had mentioned him a couple of times, Don. How long ago did you purchase the store from the previous owner?
It was 5 years ago, January.
2018.
2018. I kept saying 17, and Jen kept telling me it was 18. Well, prior to your calling for the podcast, I double checked, and she was right. I was wrong. It was January of 2018 that we took over.
Yeah. It doesn't seem that long though.
No, it doesn't.
And you mentioned he mostly, outside of the competitive Magic scene, he also, predominantly was, you had mentioned to me, the sports cards.
Yes.
He'd gone through some changes. At one point, he was a comic shop. I mean, you have to understand, he'd done this for about 20 years. He'd done comics, and I guess when the comic market tanked, Magic was his salvation. He started carrying Magic the Gathering. There really was no other stores in the area at the time, and that kind of pulled him, through the tough times. At one point, he had added Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, but he eventually let those 2 go and replaced them with sports cards, and also had done away with the comics. So when Jen and I were customers there, I mostly played there. The store was just way too claustrophobic. Jen couldn't handle it.
I couldn't. Not
It was
small area.
the arrangement of the tables and the way the store was set up was not, in our opinion, conducive to casual and friendly play. But the grinders were all there. I wanted to get better at Magic. So we started playing there, and that's how we found the store. I mean, it had its strengths, but to us, that's we wanted to make the change. So like Jen had said, the first thing we did was kicked out the sports cards, which we didn't know a whole lot about,
No.
and brought back Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh.
And it was the same location, right, that you're in now?
That store was down the road at a slightly smaller location. That we stayed there for about 2 years. First thing we did was change the configuration of the store to almost exactly what you saw in our new store.
Mm-hmm.
But we only had 3 rows of tables, and we quickly outgrew it. The other issue was, as you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, or we were just talking about how hot it can be here in Florida. That was a building built in the 70s that had a retrofitted air conditioner that just didn't get the job done, especially if we tried to put 20 or more players in the store. So we knew we had to find a better location.
And how does dealing with, since you brought it up, how does dealing with the heat there, because it differs, say, from a store that like for New York, for example, like for where I am on Long Island, we go through different seasons. You guys, you'll get cooler times in the fall and the winter and whatnot, but most of the time it's sunny and, you have fairly warmer temperatures. But in the summertime, how do you guys deal with that in terms of like, people just wanting to stay in the pool or whatnot and, maybe not want to go out or anything like that?
Well, one of the conditions we placed on the landlord was if we were going to rent the space, which had been vacant Jen found it. It was actually on a fluke. It hadn't been used in about 3 years or so. One of the conditions we put on the landlord was he had to replace the AC unit with a brand new 5-ton unit. We knew to get people in, as you just mentioned, in the heat of the summer, we would have to offer a nice, cool place. So that brand new AC with 5-ton, that keeps the store quite cool. And so a lot of people who want to get out of the heat will come to the store sometimes just to hang out because they know it's going to be cool.
Yeah.
When you took over the store, outside of rearranging the tables, what would you say was the most pressing or difficult thing that you had to combat to get the store into the vision that you both had set for it?
Definitely the player base.
Yeah.
It was,
Yep.
That was touch and go at the beginning. And we still have some issues with people, they're upset and we get it. As we diversified and added more games that were more kid friendly, we needed to also maintain that across the board with our player base. And having the competitive magic just was not working with our business model anymore. And in order to maintain that, we had to let some people go. And so that's definitely caused us some heartache.
Yeah, it's tough, but we had a tough choice to make. We wanted to create a more casual environment, a place where we would want to play. I know the previous store, if you wanted to grind for the Pro Tour, it was the place to be. But that was very intimidating, and we spoke to a lot of players who said, I never made it up to gyms because, I don't know, it was just too competitive. I was, let's face it, a lot of the people in our genre that play the trading card games are nerds. We're nerds. We're proud of it. But we're also introverts. So it makes it difficult to venture into a social setting, especially where there's a lot of intimidation from pro-level players.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's what we had to kind of work on. As Jen said, it was a challenge. It was,
and also it's very hard being a female in this industry too. A lot of people weren't okay with that. I'm not sure why, but we met a lot of resistance. And still to this day, there, you see it with interactions and customers and stuff. And that's why we've added another female to our team, is to kind of, let players know, and also customers that are coming in, that females play games too, we're just as good.
And we want everybody out in podcast land to know we have female players.
Yes.
For somebody listening, if they were to come into the store for the first time and what you've done to it now, getting over the initial hardships, is there anything pressing to this current point in time in terms of the business in the day-to-day operations?
I think we actually have two pressing issues. In my opinion, I don't know if Jen may want to add to this, but number one, we've run out of space again. We have so
Yes.
many games that are successful. We don't have enough shelf space. We already kind of took away one row of tables for product. We don't want to do that again. We don't want to reduce the play space.
Yeah.
So it's no secret we are actually looking for a larger space. And the second problem or issue that we still deal with since taking over the store is the name is slightly misleading, and we've been toying with changing it for a while. Instead of Treasure Coast Magic, we've been contemplating and planning to change to Treasure Coast Gaming to more accurately represent what we are. And it'll also cut down on the people calling on Saturday wanting to reserve a magician. And I had an older gentleman came in about a month or two ago wanting the gin and tonic trick. And as somebody who at one time dabbled with magic, that's a trick I'd never heard of. I'm kind of interested to find out what it is. But, we don't. The only magic trick we do is taking your money and giving you pieces of cardboard.
I do like the brand name decision, though. I think it's a good way to just further encompass more of what you're doing rather than like a single focus.
And I don't know, Jen, can you think of anything else that is a pressing issue? I think we've been very successful with the casual environment. I don't think we would change a thing.
You mentioned about obviously looking for a bigger space. Would you move out of the Port St. Lucie area into a different area? Do you want to stay in the same area?
I think we want to stay in the same area.
We have a very loyal customer base, and we get new customers in almost daily that make the statement, "Oh, I only live 5 minutes away." Part of the reason, I'm not going to lie, there's other good gaming stores in our geographic area. One of the things that we offer is we're close, in proximity. So no, we want to stay loyal to our customers that have helped us grow to this size. We would absolutely stay in Port St. Lucie.
And for somebody who's never been to the store before, how would you describe it upon entering in the current store that you're at?
As soon as you come through the door, there's tables.
Yeah, tables occupy predominantly the front right side of the store.
Merchandise
is down the left
side,
and then the counter and most of the interaction and the cash wraps are at the back of the store. And that was a design we went with at the old. And it's funny, we had a returning customer just last week come in and say, "This looks like the old store, but it's not where the old store was." We intentionally created the layout to look almost identical to the old store, except for bigger, so that people would feel comfortable in an environment they had gotten used to. We just have more rows of tables, but it's almost identical to the previous location.
And I love how many tables you have. I haven't seen a store with that many in it before. So do you fill those up for the most part, or is there excess, or how does that all play out?
Saturdays,
we have a sea of Commander players. It is sometimes standing room only. Yu-Gi-Oh will also use pretty much. I mean, we've actually capped with Yu-Gi-Oh and had to turn people away. And even One Piece is getting to that point now too. So
Digimon was like that too.
we're. Or the other good thing is, like on Friday nights, we have maybe one table doing a Magic Draft. We used to have one table doing Modern back in the before time. And we had a D&D group using one of the tables. So yeah, that's one of the things that we really are proud of is the amount of table space that we have. And during the week, people can just come in and play casually. The tables are there.
Yeah. No charge.
Yeah, we don't have a table fee.
That's very cool. Yeah, that reminds me actually of how it was for me growing up as a teenager. I used to go in on Saturdays to my old game store, and sadly they're not around anymore. But I used to pretty much go in there just on Saturdays just to play around literally all day. Like there weren't really any tournaments until later on in the afternoon. Yeah. But yeah, it's a cool thing that you guys do. Now you mentioned holding say Draft and Modern at the same time. Are you still doing that? Because I think that's a really cool idea. I wish that was something I could see more. out by me. Like in New York, it seems like any of the game stores I've been to, it's always like one event on one night, and I think it's pretty cool that you guys can do multiple at the same time, especially because you're afforded with all that table space.
Yeah, we actually were doing that up until around, I think, February of this year, and we lost too many of our modern players due to life events, babies, jobs. So that seems to have really impacted also our player base with the outside of just Commander.
But outside of Magic, I mean, Sunday, for instance, we actually had an interesting occurrence where we were running 3 events simultaneously.
Yeah.
We have done as many as 3. And on Wednesday nights, for instance, we offer Pauper Magic primarily, but we also offer Pioneer. And as long as we get a minimum of 4 of each, we will actually fire both.
That's great. That's a lot of fun too. I mean, just to have that variety, I think is in and of itself is a value add that you guys are offering.
Yeah, we also have pre-made decks too. So if people have never played it or are interested in playing it, we have some staple decks set up to where they can borrow them and join in.
It's a smart idea. They don't have to invest in the cards yet until they determine if it's a format that works for them. Whose idea was it to start doing that? Because I talked to a store recently who does something very similar, so I was curious how that started.
I think it was due to a customer.
Yeah, it
that
was
very unsure of whether or not they wanted to, and Don was like, "Well, you can borrow my deck. I'm not going to play tonight, so you can borrow my deck." And then that's kind of just where it morphed from. We were like, you know what? Maybe we should just make extra decks.
It was absolutely. I remember it was modern, and I had an extra Goblins deck built that I'd never played. And Mono Red, I know it's a misnomer to say it's easy to play. It's easy. It's very difficult to play correctly, but first timers can jump in with this red Goblin deck and survive. And we loaned it to a customer. It wasn't a lot of value either, so there wasn't a lot at risk. And it was after that, I think, that based on that success, I said, "Hey, we're trying to build the Pauper crowd. Let's build a few Pauper decks." Yep. And the neat thing with those is we built them with some inexpensive deck box and sleeves and told the players, "Hey, you can borrow this for nothing. All you have to do is pay entry into the tournament," which was a pauperish $5. If you like it, at the end of the evening, you can buy the deck box and sleeves, $24.99.
That's cool. And Pauper is a lot of fun too. I love it.
It is tremendous fun, and even the most competitive decks are in the $100 price range. So it's very affordable.
And I'm surprised it hasn't taken off more, to be honest. I know it does have its very niche crowd and it has its fan base, but when you think of like Pioneer or compared to Modern, it almost pales in comparison. I've always been shocked that more people don't play it, considering it's such a low barrier to entry with the cost. What would be your hypothesis as to why that is from what you see on the game store end?
I think it's just going to take time. I said the same thing about Pioneer. I think a lot of people said the same thing about Pioneer, which is that, it's, I always call it baby modern. But I think it's just going to take time. I think a lot of people love it. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some of these RCQs later on possibly offering that as, one of the options for the main event.
Yeah, just remember too how long it took for Wizards to actually acknowledge Pauper as a format.
Yep.
We adopted it as soon as when the professor at Clarion Community College adopted it and loved it. Yep. That's when we were sold, and we started supporting it before Wizards actually supported it. Now, on the other hand, with Pioneer, they were very quick to step up to the plate. They kind of misfired the first time they attempted it. I forget what the boundary was for the sets. But this current implementation of Pioneer, they were very quick to bring to the table. So I think that's part of the reason maybe Pauper hasn't been as successful.
Yeah, I've always wondered that, but like you, when the professor talked about it, that's what got me into Pauper right then and there. And I kind of always like speculated in my head. I said, I wonder if Wizards wasn't as gung ho on Pauper compared to Pioneer, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Pauper was like a community created format versus Pioneer that they created.
I believe
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Actually, Commander was a community created too.
Yeah. Commander too.
But
yeah.
yes, and that is correct. It was a community created thing. Part of the other reason I think for the slowness of the success, and I'm going to say slowness because I do believe it will eventually rise in popularity, is there's some misconceptions about what Pauper is. People hear commons only. They think about the commons maybe they saw at their last pre-release. They don't get too excited.
Yeah.
Once people understand that they can use commons all the way back through the history of Magic, as long as it's not banned, you can play some very, very interesting decks.
Yeah, and there's been cards that have been busted down to from rares down to commons. So as long as it was printed as
Yeah, I mean, Ristic Study is legal in Pauper.
And they recently downshifted Monastery Swiftspear, which was originally just an uncommon, and they downgraded that, and that's a very powerful card too. And
that's it's you can actually, and that's why we invite people, and if anyone's out there listening, stop into Treasure Coast Magic, because we have Pauper decks to loan. We still have some of those $24.99 ones, but we have since built some tier 1 competitive Pauper decks for loaner decks. We actually built one on demand for a very good customer. And we only say very good, not because he spends a lot of money, but because he's there regularly. That he said, hey, I really want to play Affinity, but I don't have the cards. So we put it together for him. And so we have a very healthy Pauper community.
Oh, Affinity, that's music to my ears. That's my favorite deck ever, even going back to Modern. Mostly it's a very nostalgic thing for me, because that was like Mirrodin's when I first got into Magic, and that was the first set I remember. And so all those cards I kind of have like a tie to. So when I found out that there was a Pauper version of it, that was like I was sold at that point. But you're right, Don and Jen, that if people just realize that it's just because it's commons, I think people are thinking, oh, there's no mythics, no rares, that it's going to be boring gameplay. And I think that's kind of the mindset people are thinking of, is that the gameplay is not maybe as fun, but I think it's great.
Oh, no, it's just as exciting as Pioneer or Modern.
I think it's even more challenging, because you've got like this window of, what you can use that's available. So it's interesting to see some of the brews that have come through the door.
Yeah, I would say the biggest drawback or weakness is you don't have the explosive mana base, but that, in my opinion, makes the games more challenging.
That's the competitive side I like of the game, is almost like more of the competition with yourself, because now it's forcing you to be like, oh, I can't just put the very best expensive cards in here. I have to really think it out. And I kind of like that mental game.
Exactly.
You hit the nail on the head.
So I'm curious to know, what for both of you is your favorite game to play currently?
I still like to draft.
And I was going to say, and of the different games, while I've sampled almost all of them, and for a while Flesh and Blood really had me hooked, I still keep coming back to Magic the Gathering. For all its negatives, for everything it's been through, Magic the Gathering is still my favorite game.
Mine too. And coming from somebody that started off playing Yu-Gi-Oh as a kid, the minute I was introduced to Magic, that was it for me. Like, that's all I then played. And Jen, like you, drafting is probably one of my favorite things to do. I don't know if either of you had a chance to do it before, but I got to do it for the first time. And probably one of the funnest draft sets I ever got to do was that mystery booster one. I don't know if you've had the chance to do it before.
No. Let me see. I think the last one that I didn't do Lords of the Ring either. I
didn't get to do it yet either.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, though, they are having I know it's a little pricey as far as there's a premium price tag, but they are having a lot of fun with it.
Oh, yeah. I think it was Phyrexia.
Yeah, Phyrexia All will be one, I think, is the last set. Fortunately, because there's two of us, one of us usually gets to play. Jen has been doing a lot of the drafts when she can on Friday nights. Wednesday nights, I'm usually playing Pauper or Pioneer. I love Pauper. Probably it might be my second favorite format after draft. And I think there's, with draft, I used to hate it. Then I started listening to another podcast, Limited Resources, and once my skill improved, it became my favorite format. It's just, you're not getting beat by someone's wallet. That's the thing I like the best about it.
That's what I like.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember talking to somebody in a game store I used to go to in the past, something I never thought of, because like you said, in a lot of ways, in a constructed format, if you have the money to buy the best deck, that's going to put you in a advantage. Granted, there's still the variance involved, but when it came to draft, I remember somebody said to me, and it always stood with me, was draft actually is the most difficult form to master.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah, and you only get better at it by continuous repetition. And I've tried to do it as much as I could, and I was like, in the beginning, I was terrible at it. I'm still not that great at it, but I still find it to be one of the most fun.
No, and I think for all the people out there in podcast land, it is absolutely true. The first few times, you're going to hate it. And if you stick with it, as you did and as we did, you start to get better at it. I don't think any of us will ever become a Reed Duke, but it absolutely positively, and it's so much fun. It is just very enjoyable.
And it can get you out of your comfort zone too. Like, I disliked playing red. I didn't like that it was fast. I liked playing, more slower games. But draft was definitely kind of pushed me into, because you don't necessarily get to always pick what you want to play.
You have to learn to draft what's open.
Yeah, sometimes you get stuck with different colors, and so red has really become my favorite, I think, now.
Oh, cool! Like almost a complete turnaround.
Yeah. But I still maintain that I'm not a big fan of blue.
I think that dates back to my fairies deck that I used to spank her with.
Well, I could say it's definitely not fun. I'm always fascinated by people who play blue-white control. It's not something I could do, or because I'm always just really impressed of how they know when to counter spells and whatnot.
Yeah.
But that is it's amazing to watch people who have mastered it and that's all they play.
Don's
but
definitely.
Boy, is it frustrating to play against.
I was going to say I'm certainly no master. And one of the, back when Jim still owned the store, they actually sometimes wouldn't let me play control because I was too slow.
It's the Mother May I deck.
Yes. Oh, without a doubt. You're allowed to play your lands, but that's about it.
Yeah.
That's great, though, that you both get the time to be able to play, because I know not every store owner has that luxury.
I can just remember seeing Jim when he was the solo operator, and he would sometimes draft if they needed, to keep it even so nobody had to buy. And there were many times customers would walk in the store, he would have to stop playing, get up and wait on the customer.
Yeah.
Jen and I have the luxury of she can continue to play.
Yeah.
Or on Wednesday nights, I can continue to play.
One of the things I have to ask about, because it was one of my favorite things I saw in the store, I've never seen anything quite as massive as it, but I love your display case, that gigantic display case that I think, Don, you told me you guys had built.
No, I think you're talking about the one with all the magic singles in it.
Yes, that one.
My son actually found that for us. He's the one who helped with the some of the construction on the layout of the new store, and he actually had a customer. He does tile for his main job. Had a customer that was, or he might have found it online, but the shelves originally sat flat, and he's the one that convinced us to take it in and to display the singles in it. Jen's the one who found those fancy brackets that let us angle the shelves so that you could see the cards.
And then I came up with the idea to take the sheets from a binder and put the cards in, and then tape them to the to the shelves, so they're angled so people can see them, but they're protected.
And I thought it was just going to be a huge waste of money. It turns out it's a focal point of the store.
Yeah.
And people come in and you can't buy it if you can't see it. And it's been very, very successful, and we're glad that you appreciated it.
I do. I love it. I thought it was a great touch. It was something very unique to the store. So how do you go about marketing to get new people, whether it be to the store? Like, do you use social media at all? Like, what is your preferred way of, or is it just traditional word of mouth?
I think it's a mix of both. I know recently we've kind of slacked on the social media. A lot of it's word of mouth. We are picking up, trying to do more advertising. So
yeah,
it's a something we got to work on.
It's a tough industry to advertise in. The traditional methods typically don't give you a whole lot of return for your dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have found word of mouth has been, since we opened, our single greatest form of advertising. And when people come in, we always ask, how'd you find us? And about half the time, it's like, my friend told me he plays here. And the other half is just that I Googled Magic or I Googled Pokemon, and yours was the first store that came up.
That's how I found you guys. I Googled, trading card game stores in Florida, and that's kind of how I found out about you guys too. So sometimes the old school method always seems to be like one of the best methods.
Yes.
Well, and we're also kind of proud of the fact that enough people must be talking about us for all these people to say, hey, my friend sent me here. They said this, they said that, and so forth. It makes us feel good that we've created that environment that people want to tell their friends about.
That's great to hear.
Yep.
Do you do only sales in store? Do you do anything online at all?
We have an online presence, but to this day, we still, and it happened during COVID out of necessity. We stumbled onto Square, who let us put up a website for free with customer pickup. So people would drive up out front and we would actually bring the product out to them. And after COVID, we just kept it up. We only offer in-store pickup. So I guess to answer your question, we currently only offer in-store pickup. Maybe down the road we will ship, but we like to hold our product for our loyal customers that take the time to travel to our store and walk through our door.
And I guess to wrap things up here, what would be for each of you a future aspiration you have for the store?
A future aspiration we have for the store. Well, for me, I've already stated it. I absolutely want to change the name. I think that we've pretty much even settled on the new name. We just have to go through the steps to make it happen. We did decide initially to postpone it because Treasure Coast Magic's been in this area for years, and it had a very loyal following. Some of Jim's customers are still customers of ours to this day. So we didn't rush to change it, but I think the time is now. I think we do need to change it. So, very soon I hope that we become Treasure Coast Gaming. Interestingly enough, our initials would be TCG.
I would like to see, I think, more female players join us. That seems to be really hard to tap into. Really just move into a larger location. I think we've kind of outgrew this store. If we had, I think, a bigger location, there's a lot more things that we could do with the store, and it could grow for the community as well. I think the community is huge in helping us move along, and it's one thing that we enjoy doing. We love giving back to the community. We love helping out, and so that's definitely something I'd like to see happen.
Well, Jen, Don, thank you both for coming on. It's been an absolute joy and pleasure talking to both of you today.
You too, hon.
And hopefully you'll get back to the store. And if you come on a Wednesday night, we'll play some Pauper.
Absolutely. I can't wait. I will definitely do that. Well, thanks again for coming on. And for everybody listening, if you'd like to subscribe to the show, you could do so at thematchslip.com/newsletter, or you can leave a voicemail at anchor.fm/thematchslip, and we will catch you in the next episode. Take care.